At long last, we finally reached the Paldea region in our worst Pokemon series. And despite giving us far more Pokemon than the past 3 regions, this has to be the hardest region to rank so far. Almost every single Pokemon in this region is good, so finding even 10 mediocre ones was a pretty monumental task. So hey, if your favorite Gen 9 Pokemon ends up in this list, don't take it personally. There are not many bad Pokemon in this region. This is a really hard list to make. Number 10, Veluza. Gita uses this Pokemon, so you should already know it's not very good. Veluza has a pretty decent attack stat of 102, but unfortunately, none of its other stats are even remotely close to 100. Including speed, which it needs more than McDonald's needs the dollar menu right now. Because instead of just giving this guy 100 speed for a completely reasonable base stat total of 508, that would only be marginally stronger than Flamigo, by the way, Game Freak decided to link this Pokemon's entire viability to its signature move, Flayaway, which is basically like if Shell Smash had a baby with belly drum. Try not to envision that too hard. Doubling the attack, special attack, and speed stats of Veluza, but instead of dropping its defenses, it loses half of its total HP. Losing so much HP puts Veluza in a pretty vulnerable state, which means its chances to safely use this move are few and far between. Which is a shame, because otherwise Veluza learns a ton of fantastic moves by leveling up. Liquidation, Night Slash, and Psycho Cut to name a few. Unfortunately, none of them can get boosted by Sharpness due to it being a hidden ability, and it's very hard to get without beating the game and unlocking 6 and 7 star raids first. Water Psychic also doesn't do it many favors as a mid to late game Pokemon, as the only type specialists that Veluza outright beats by that point in the game are Airy of Team Star and Rika in the Elite Four. But even then, better options exist. Paldea is no slouch when it comes to other good water and psychic types. There are many fish in the sea, as they say, and while Veluza is decent, it's certainly not the best catch in the ocean. Number 9, Cetitan. Oh boy, a slow and frail ice-type Pokemon, a tale as bad and formulaic as an MCU movie. 5th phase. Oh well, surely this one will go differently than the dozens of other examples of flops from previous... Oh, it didn't? Well, color me surprised. Okay, to give it credit, Cetitan is a very good HP tank, but sadly, its defenses do not hold up the fort as well as you'd expect. Which means this guy will be draining your Hyper Potions like Pokemon cards drain my bank account. While it can evolve right away from Cetado, it also lacks any great moves until it gets Ice Spinner at level 44. And most of its good TMs are gated until the end of the Starfall Street storyline. Say that 3 times fast. It doesn't help that Ice is also just not a very valuable type in Paldea. The ground-type Titans of Great Tusk or Iron Treads are also part Fighting or Steel, so Cetitan is no help there. The Dragon Titans are actually the Water-type Dondozo and the part Water-type Tatsugiri, which cancels out Ice's winning matchup. So assuming you didn't save Brassius as the 8th gym leader, the only trainers Cetitan truly beats are Rika, Larry, and Hassel, all in the Elite Four. And even then, most of Rika's Pokemon carry moves that beat Ice, and Larry, Staraptor, and Flamigo can both fold Cetitan pretty easily. So with Cetitan being this region's only pure Ice-type Pokemon, you can see how the odds are pretty stacked against it. If you really want an Ice-type, you'd be better off going for Baxcalibur almost every time. Number 8, Grafaiai. Another perplexing case of a Pokemon, Grafaiai is our very first Poison Normal type, and well, it's about as mid of a type combination as that sounds. Now, Grafaiai is the first Pokemon in this video who I would say finally has somewhat okay stats, with an emphasis on attack and speed, which is great given that it learns Slash, U-Turn, and Poison Jab all relatively early. The problem is, who is it gonna use those moves on? The only trainers in the entire game that Grafaiai solidly beats are Brassius, who you should be able to beat with Pokemon much better than Shroodle, and Ortega, who, again, you should be able to beat with Pokemon much better than Grafaiai. Not to mention, if you do opt to catch Shroodle at the very beginning of the game, it probably takes the longest to evolve of all the early game Pokemon, waiting until level 28 to become Grafaiai. And by that point, Grafaiai is still far from the best mid-game Pokemon. Its 2 forms are just placed in very awkward spots in the game. And lastly, Grafaiai just pales in comparison to Paldea's premier poison type, Mr. Lightning McQueen himself, Revavroom. Being a poison steel type who is able to learn a litany of moves outside of its 2 types gives this devious car engine so much more versatility than Grafaiai. Number 7, Arboliva. Like Grafaiai, if you looked at Arboliva broadly speaking, you probably wouldn't see anything wrong with it right away. It has pretty great stats, reaches its final form at a decent level 35, and even has the Walmart Great Value brand of Grassy Surge as an ability, which, hey, still puts down grassy terrain at the end of the day. So why is it here? Well, because unlike most Pokemon on this list, it's really the beginning of the evolution line that brings the family down. Being stuck with Smoliv until level 25 is brutal. considering it's one of the game's weakest Pokemon and is more than likely to sit on the bench and collect EXP than it is to actually go out and fight. And that's just further solidified by all the early game matchup Smoliv loses. It's not even a good pick for Cloth, as its normal typing makes it weak to Rock Smash. Realistically, this family doesn't get a good fight until Kofu midway through the game, when it's nearing its Arboliva stage. And finally, when it becomes Arboliva, while its stats are finally good, this Pokemon is certainly a TM guzzler. Remember how I said that Grass-type Pokemon are seemingly stuck in Gen 2 when it comes to their level-up movesets? Well, yeah, Arboliva fits right into that camp. And since you can't obtain any good TMs like Earth Power, Dazzling Gleam, and Pollen Puff until late game, this is the grassiest grass type that is ever going to grass type. Like I said, when it's all said and done, Arboliva is not awful. It only gets better as the game progresses. The problem is just how long the runway is for a Pokemon that most people are probably adding to their team around the first gym. Whether or not all that suffering is worth it is up to you. Number 6, Bombirdier. Or, stat-wise, essentially Veluza 2.0, but with worse typing. And just like Veluza, if Game Freak had just given this thing its dang hidden ability, Rocky Payload, during the main story, it wouldn't even be close to sniffing this list. Okay, maybe. It would be like 10th, or a dishonorable mention or something. Nowhere close to 6th, though. But yeah, Bombardier's biggest issue is its combination of typing and location, as Dark Flying means it only beats a select few opponents in the game, and since most players will have already beaten Katie and Brassius by the time they're able to catch Bombardier, the only opponents left in the game that it performs decently against are Rhyme and Tulip. And by that point in the game, its stats are not competing with most other late-game Dark types like Bisharp, Weavile, or even Low-Kicks, who's available around the same time Bombardier is. Which is why Bombardier honestly would have been much better off just being a Rock type. The competition is not nearly as fierce in that department. But you know where the competition is fierce? Your YouTube homepage, which is why you should subscribe to my channel so you never miss a video. Please? Number 5, Rabsca. Speaking of Pokemon who match up against almost nobody well, this bug psychic type perfectly embodies this. As cool as Rabsca is, its low speed and average defenses do not keep this Pokemon healthy with its plethora of weaknesses. And its gimmick of reviving party members seems better suited for competitive play than an actual playthrough, because, you know, just buy a revive instead. What are you, broke? I know inflation's been bad, but this is Pokemon we're talking about. Now, here's the really good part about Rabsca. You can evolve it basically as soon as you catch Rellor in Asado Desert, due to its evolution being tied to the Let's Go feature, so for a short period of time, you'll have a pretty superpowered early game bug. However, this also happens to be the section of the game with the most losing matchups for Rabsca, with Mela, Atticus, and Titan Earthworm all lurking relatively close to the level 26 mark you catch Rellor at. Heck, I'll even throw Iono in there with her Mismagius. So, unfortunately, Rabsca's biggest selling point is quickly diminished by the foes it immediately has to fight. And after that, the rest of the game is a monumental struggle. Not only does Rabsca struggle to keep up stat-wise, but its best moves, Bug Buzz and Psychic, aren't learned until levels 45 and 50 respectively. Which means for most of the game, it'll be relying on the relatively weak Struggle Bug as its primary bug move. Being a bug-type special attacker in general is just hard after Signal Beam got retired in Gen 8, may it forever rest in peace. Number 4, Oinkologne. Yeah, as much as I like to cut the first route Pokemon a break, Oinkologne could not be spared from the top 4. Though I will say its stats are remarkably high for such an early game Pokemon. 489, that's nearly a jump of 100 points compared to old generation early game normal types. And hey, they actually bothered to give both forms of Oinkologne different stats, unlike Meowstic, but they're not really different enough to help much. So while Oinkologne has pretty much the exact same shortcomings as all other early game normal types, I will say it is probably the single best early game tank you are going to get. If you are Nuzlocking, do not sleep on Oinkologne. This guy will probably get you out of some sketchy battles in the beginning. Honestly, Oinkologne is probably one of the best early game Pokemon that we have seen, so it pains me to put it this low on the list, but really that just speaks to how competitive Paldea's roster is. There are not many Pokemon in this region who are truly bad. Number 3, Wugtrio. This Pokemon is the definition of an outclassed water type. First off, as a water type physical attacker, this thing's only usable move as a Wiglet is going to be Aqua Jet. It's another one of those bad stat and type mismatches. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised when you just lazily copy and paste Dugtrio stats onto a new Pokemon. But hey, don't worry, once it evolves, it gets Triple Dive! A 90 power attack that takes entirely too long to execute for kids with TikTok brains to stay engaged with the game. How in the world is this Pokemon supposed to win against Palafin? Heck, forget Palafin, Dondozo, Floatzel, or basically any other water-type Pokemon with a secondary type and better coverage? It pretty much pales in comparison to everything except maybe Golduck. Point is, this is not the region to be a subpar water type in, because they brought back almost all the heavy hitters in this dex. Wugtrio sadly cannot compete. Number 2, Squawkabilly. For some reason, one bad parrot Pokemon just wasn't enough for Game Freak, as they decided to remake Chatot with arguably even fewer redeeming qualities, a feat that most of mankind deemed impossible for many years. But just like putting a man on the moon, we somehow managed to do the impossible. Though, I guess if this Pokemon has one redeeming factor, it's that it's the most early game pilled Pokemon I've ever seen. Aerial Ace at level 13, the first 2 gyms being Bug and Grass? Yeah, he can do a little bit of work. But you know what other flying-type Pokemon is found equally as early but has stats that actually keep it relevant throughout the entire game? Flamigo! Why would you ever use Squawkabilly when Flamigo is equally as easy to obtain with better moves, better typing, and better longevity? Seriously, Flamigo has a base stat total of 500 and is found on this game's equivalent of Route 2. It actually displaces so many flying types it's not even funny. No wonder it's the undisputed speedrun champ of Scarlet and Violet. Squawkabilly also has one of the worst move pools for any Gen 9 Pokemon, as it's built exclusively as a physical attacker, leaving its best moves as Brave Bird, U-Turn, and Double Edge. Which, in case you haven't noticed, is not very good coverage. And 2 of those moves do recoil, which is not great news for a Pokemon as frail as this one. Sadly, there just really isn't a reason to ever use this Pokemon. For this region's dishonorable mentions, we have to start with Scovillain. Certainly one of the weirdest Pokemon to come out of Gen 9, I absolutely love Scovillain. I only wish I loved its stats as much as I love its design. With 65 defenses across the board, Scovillain is one of this generation's frailest fully evolved Pokemon, with a measly 75 speed not doing much for it. Fortunately, between Flamethrower and Seed Bomb, this Pokemon is really good offensively, even with a relatively shallow move pool. And Sunny Day with Chlorophyll at least lets it patch up its mediocre speed. And since Stone Evolutions had their moves fixed in Gen 9, there is literally no downside to evolving Capsakid as soon as you catch one in the Western Province. So you can have a pretty powerful Scovillain with winning matchups against trainers like Brassius, Kofu, and the Titan Earthworm at the right time. And for the most part, Scovillain's matchup spread against most of the game's notable trainers stays pretty good through the end of the game. The only major downside of this Pokemon is that you'll just have to look out for faster, harder hitting foes in almost every battle. And our only other dishonorable mention is Gholdengo. Yes, despite Pokemon number 1000 being a massive marketing king, and one of this generation's strongest competitive Pokemon, using one in a main story playthrough is an incredible drag. Gimmighoul is designed to be one of the most useless Pokemon in the game. It's only a slight step above Cosmog and Cosmoem. It likely won't be until the very end of the game that you have enough Gimmighoul coins to evolve into Gholdengo. Unless you are so dedicated to this Pokemon that you exclusively hunt the coins before doing any of the story. But there is no denying that Gholdengo is incredibly powerful, so despite how much of a drag it is to get this Pokemon on your team, it could absolutely not break into the top 10. And number 1, Spidops. I wish I could say this Pokemon is number 1 for any reason beside its stats and typing, but man, that's all that really needs to be said. Mono Bug, already we have the worst type in the game. Don't say it's Ice in the comment section either, just admit you're stuck in 2019. And with a base stat total of 404, aside from Squawkabilly, no other fully evolved Pokemon comes even remotely close to matching how bad its stats are. Though, Lokix only has a base stat total of 450, and he's also a bug type, yet somehow, he's one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. So how does Spidops feel like he's on an entirely different planet compared to Lokix? Well, mostly, stat distribution, lack of good abilities, at least in single player. Stakeout is pretty good for competitive, which is sad because with a few small adjustments, Spidops could be a much better Pokemon. If you made him bug fighting type, maybe gave him 20 more points in attack and gave him literally anything other than Insomnia as a primary ability, okay, he'd probably still be a bottom 2 Pokemon in this region, but he'd at least be usable. Right now, he really does just feel like the one Pokemon from this region that Game Freak forgot to give anything good to. Almost every Pokemon in this region, even the ones like Squawkabilly and Oinkologne, have something going for them. Not Spidops, though. And so, with that, we have concluded our worst Pokemon in every region series. For now. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.